Good evening. Welcome to another show. I'm going to be covering part two of Nate's videos on the Chicago Teachers Union president, Stacy Davis Gates. So I covered part one last week, did a quick one, and that was Nate's smaller one. That was a 10-minute long one. And if you haven't seen that one, basically the controversy is Stacy Davis Gates, president of the Chicago's Teachers Union, enrolled her eldest child, her son, in a private school. And the conservative media put out a narrative that essentially tried to say that comments that Stacey Davis Gates has made about school choice policies being grounded in racism were equivalent to her saying that all private schools are racist, and now, therefore, since she's enrolled her son in a private Catholic school, she is therefore a hypocrite. And maybe a little bit of a racist herself, which is usually always you know, the turnaround from a lot of conservatives. If racism gets thrown one way, they're very eager to figure out a way to throw it right back, rather than think about things. Sorry, it's not very charitable of me, but it is a technique that I see quite a bit. So with this particular one, this was part two, and this is because Stacey Davis Gates, once this little controversy kicked up, she was invited onto a CNN program with Abby Martin. I think it's Abby Phillips. And so she's giving an interview on that. And that's the kind of the beginning. That's sort of the focus of Nate's video here. But then he goes on into more. So this one's going to be a little bit longer, but we'll see what we can do. So with that being said, Wilberforce says, please don't let me join this cast. In order to keep it as short as possible, yeah, I'll just keep this one down to me. I did want to highlight this comment here, though, from Nicola H. I'm vehemently opposed to the Catholic Church, but I enrolled my nephew in a Catholic school. Nate would say I'm a hypocrite and not consider something relevant like my nephew choosing that school. Yeah. And some of the criticism that actually came out against Stacey Davis Gates for the choice that she made for her son's school was remarkably tone deaf. People being like, well, why didn't she enroll him in this school? If it's about soccer teams, why not put him in this school? Or why not do this thing for him? And it's like, look, I don't know if the parents have to go through the entire list of reasons why this school might be the best fit for their son. There might be some personal factors involved, so maybe butt out a little bit. In terms of like trying to level the whole hypocrisy thing, now if she's been against charter schools, let's say, and then took advantage of charter funding to enroll one of her kids in one of those kinds of schools, that would be pretty blatantly hypocritical. Unless she had made an about face, in advance for that. And even then, she would have taken a lot of heat from it. Probably would have lost her position as Chicago Teachers Union president. But in this case, even like teachers unions, I don't know, come out against this kind of thing. The idea of school choice being a problem is always one of these things that gets equated like, well, what you want here, and this seemed to be kind of the final thrust of Nate's last point, his last video, was it's okay that Stacey Davis Gates gets to choose, but other people don't get to choose. That's not entirely fair. Most teachers unions don't care about the choice between public and private schools. What they care about are school choice programs that funnel public money away from those public schools towards the private schools that otherwise would have just had to charge tuition like a normal private school. And so that's kind of where things got left there. So now we're going to get into this one, and we'll see where Nate takes it. All right, let's say hello to a few people here. Dustin, good to see you. Jay is here. Good to see you as well. I wish this thing didn't flake out like that. And James Apperson is here. Good to see you as well. That's probably it for now, because I don't know that there's that many people going to watch this one. These political ones, they only get so much attention. It's not like when I'm like, taking the piss out of Darth Dawkins. Okay. Let's see here. We shrink this down, and we'll get started with this. Usual rules apply. Yell at me if the video is not coming through, but otherwise we should be good to go. I think I'm going to increase the speed on this one just a bit to 1.25. All right, here we go.
Hey guys, what's going on? So let's talk about this interview by CNN of this teachers union boss. Now, we just did.
Yes, let's do it.
A video about this maybe a couple of days ago where this woman, she's the president of the teachers union, and she essentially was saying school choice was racist, private schools were racist, and if you
Okay, he's right there. School choice programs. He's almost right there. The first one. Yes. She was saying that school choice policies are rooted in racism. So that's half right. But then he just said private schools are racist. She never said that. They added that part.
don't send your black child to a failing school, there was something wrong with you, right? Now, we all know
She didn't say that, and neither did the union. Nate concluded that that must have been what they were implying, and it was an unfair conclusion.
the issue with school choice. Black children are being sent to the worst schools in the country. So, to change that, the politicians have said, hey, let's do this. Let's let the parents send their kids to any school they want, right? We'll give them a voucher. They can send them to private school, public school, wherever they want, right? The best possible school. And people like her are against that. They want the black children in those areas to go to failing schools because they don't give a damn about those kids. They just give a damn about continually make money, right? Because she is the president of the teachers union. And if students leave those failing schools, then guess what? She loses money. The teachers union loses money. So they need to keep black students in failing schools so they can continue to make money, even though they know they can't teach those students, even though they know they're failing. So the hypocrisy here is that she doesn't send her kid to the failing school. She sends them to the private school, the school that
She's sending one to a private school. Her daughters are still in public schools. She actually was cited in a, I don't know if it's going to be included in this, that she said that she really regretted the fact that it was painful for her to admit that her choice to live in the South Side of Chicago in a predominantly black neighborhood would lead to her kids having diminished opportunities. And I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know if she was trying to say that maybe she didn't prepare for that, or otherwise maybe she would have done things differently. But she was acknowledging that that was a significant sacrifice. She wanted to live there, in that community. She wanted to be on the ground, involved locally, and her kids were involved, obviously, with those schools. Like I said, her two daughters are still enrolled in local schools in that part of Chicago, I think. Um, and so now she's saying, now they have decreased options and diminished opportunities by the time they get to high school, possibly even middle school on that side of town, because of the school funding issue. It's interesting that what Nate brings up here is like, hey, politicians came up with this awesome idea to just, we'll give you these vouchers so you can send your kids to the best schools. The interesting thing about that is that normally what would happen is taxpayers pay money into a coffer, right? And it usually pays out in terms of education. At least that's normally how it's funded at a local level. Some federal money comes in. Normally, when you have that kind of public expenditure on a public service like public education, you're going to want some kind of political oversight, some kind of accountability. And you have that with public schools in the form of a school board. So, despite what Nate and other conservatives will try to tell people, these unions really run the schools, school boards do. The school boards do. And the school boards are accountable to voters and they're accountable to the public. If that money gets funneled and usually approved, and it varies from state to state and from in different cities, but normally the rate of accountability is reduced slightly in the sense that most of the time, if a charter school or one of these participating private schools, in order to get the voucher or to get the whatever, they're going to have to meet some kind of state mandated requirement. But the one thing that they don't have to do is establish a school board of their own. So at the end of the day, a lot of those schools just don't have that. The other thing that those schools don't required to have is like they don't have the same accommodations requirements that public schools do. So things like special education spending and those kinds of things, those are out. They don't have to worry about that. So this is one of the things where they're not exactly operating there's not this thing of parity at this point. And Nate just is kind of presenting it like a lot of conservatives will present it like, well, hey, there's good schools, there's bad schools. The good schools are private. What if your per pupil price for that your money would have spent or the government would have spent to have your kid in that public school? We cut you a check for that same amount, and you turn that over to tuition to one of these schools over here. Theoretically, maybe that sounds kind of nifty, but the problem is that all you're doing is shifting money around and creating a new problem. You essentially have a two-tiered school system or a three-tiered system by the time you're done. And one thing that he leaves out, it was mentioned in one of the final clips in the first video. A lot of these schools, because of the areas where they can be at, will have because they usually do in some areas where they have better testing than some of the public schools. They have an enrollment based on lottery. So it's just sort of the roll of the dice that your kid's even going to get a spot in there anyway. And if your kid ever does anything, or they end up finding out that your kid has needs that they can't handle, kid can be removed from that school. And there really isn't anything for the parent to do about it because there's no school board. And they can try to appeal to the state, but it's different. Usually what will end up happening is if that kid has special needs, they have to go to a public education. They have to go to a public school that's required to provide that kind of thing. The charter school's not. So lots. It gets very complicated, and the way that this ends up getting presented as being a simple solution for people, to deal with failing schools really isn't. And in some cases, I suspect the problem in Chicago has been uh, these kinds of pushes towards this kind of education as a way to siphon funding away from the public schools and towards the kind of, you know, gentrified charter school kind of projects. Uh, Wilberforce mentions the charter I taught at had an entry exam that mirrored state tests. If you weren't already in the 85th percentile, you couldn't attend. Yeah. Um, and Spooky Bedhair is oi oi. Good to see you, Spooky Bedhair. Yeah, kind of nitpicky, but yeah, this is worth pointing out. Jason, teachers unions are funded based on the number of students in attendance at a particular school. Yeah, this is sort of the thing. So the teachers themselves, are getting paid to teach at public schools, and the idea here is like, well, hey, what Nate's trying to present is like, well, they don't care about your kids. They just want those kids there so they can get the federal money so that they can get paid. Um, okay, well, those teachers can teach at charter schools too. The interesting thing about that, and this is not a not insignificant factor when pushing charter schools, is that many charter schools are aggressively anti-union. So it's a way to bust up teachers unions. And why would why would a politician want to bust up? Oh, because teachers unions vote predominantly, overwhelmingly for Democrats. So if you're a Republican politician and you want to reduce the power of that bloc, you just get rid of unions as much as you can. And, let's be careful here because Illinois is a blue state, and the Chicagoland area is overwhelmingly blue. So conservatives there are usually looking for any kind of claw they can, any kind of hand grip they can get.
She considers to be racist. So CNN has her on and interviews her about this hypocrisy. So before we go into this interview, let me give you a little history about what's going on. Listen to what she said in the past about sending her own children to public school.
Last year, in a Chicago Magazine article, Gates said, quote, "I can't advocate on behalf of public education without it taking root in my own household.
I'm also a mother. My children go to the Chicago public schools. These are things that help to legitimize my space within the coalition."
So just to make it clear, she's like, hey, my kids go to the public schools too. They go to the same suffering schools as your kids go to, because that legitimizes her as an advocate for public schools, right? Hey, I'm sending my kids to these same failing schools. Now, it's kind of sick, to be honest with you, that the schools that you're sending your kids to are failing and are horrible, and you're sending your own children there just to prove some ridiculous point. It just shows you how sick sometimes these people can be.
I agree. That is sick. Listen to what he's saying here. So now she's in a situation where she's sending her kids. This was back in March 6th of 2022. She's sending all three of her kids into public school. So now it's sick that she's making those kids attend them, because his point before was that all Chicago schools are failing schools, which wasn't a point that was backed up. Critics of Stacy Davis Gates to send her son to that particular Catholic school were criticized because there were well-funded private public Chicago schools with soccer teams that she could have sent her kid to, according to them. Now, I'm not going to get it. I couldn't get into the minutia of which school is going to work better for her. I mean, that's up to her and her husband and their child. But that was something that was laid out there. So it's certainly not the case that every school in Chicago, especially every public high school, is failing. That's just a narrative that Nate's decided to run with. And now he's using that to extend, like, okay, what she's saying here is that she's got skin in the game. Her kids are in the system. They're going to these kinds of schools. She wants to see them funded, and she wants to see them succeed so that her kids can succeed. That makes her a better advocate. That's what I get out of this. Nate seems to be saying that this harridan has intentionally stuck her kids with failing schools to burnish her credentials as a union president, when that's not what she said. That the lack of charity here I mean, this is just mudslinging at its worst. This is really a disgusting move.
right? Well, why would you do that to your children? Because she's willing to do that to other people's children, right? It's not even a game.
Oh, so she's a monster. So she is doing that to her kids, and now she's willing to foist other kids into the same situation. Why? So that they can be better advocates too, Nate? None of this follows. This is some of the worst logic I've ever seen. Like, I mean, you could tear this apart in a court case. If he's trying to present like a case here where he's prosecuting Stacy Davis Gates and he's trying to impugn her motives here, this ain't great. Like, how on earth do you even prove that? She wants her kids enrolled in public schools. She still has some of her kids enrolled in public schools. Her two daughters are. She said that, as far as those schools go, they're fine. Her concern for her son was opportunities when it came to high school. And the high schools have an issue in the area that she was in. Maya. No, this isn't the same one. The one I did last week that's only about 45 minutes long, I covered Nate's first video on this. So he covered this in a 10-minute video when it kind of initially came out in the news. He did this longer video about a week or two, I think a week or two later. And he's kind of rehashing it here. But the reason he's doing this is because she was invited onto a CNN thing to discuss the issue. So that's where we're at. And good to see you, by the way. Thanks for joining.
So now, this is what she has said about private schools and school choice. She literally calls them racist. Check.
She literally calls them racist. Let's
this
see.
out.
Publicly, Gates has voiced strong opposition to school choice in the Illinois Invest in Kids program that allows for tax credits that benefit private schools. On social media, Gates said, quote, "School choice was actually the choice of racists. It was created to avoid integrating schools with black children." She also posted a link to this article titled "The Racist Origins of Private School Vouchers."
So you see where this is going.
Yeah, I see where this is going. She's talking about private school vouchers and school choice initiatives. Policy, not private schools. She didn't demonize private schools. She didn't say private schools were racist. Nate played those saying that she literally called private schools racist. It's the same problem he had with his last video, and it's just on its face incorrect. It's just flatly, categorically false. That's not what she said.
Right. She's just anti-school choice. It's all racist. It's all racist, and that is the coalition of the left.
She is anti-school choice if you're talking about anti-school choice, talking about school choice policy. It's very important to make this distinction because a lot of conservatives don't get it. And quote unquote independents who don't pay attention to this stuff, except when they tune into some like outrage bait like Nate's putting out here. The point of this is to say that school choice is equivalent to school choice programs and school choice voucher programs, and those kinds of policy initiatives are equivalent to a parent being able to have the ability to choose to send their kid either to a public school or to a private school. Those are not the same thing. You could eliminate all voucher programs, all charter schools, and you will still have public schools and private schools, and you would still have the choice to send them there. The issue is whether or not certain people are priced out of the private schools, and many are. The cynical aspect of this is as a policy choice is that if you can convince people like your kid's going to have a better, if we can convince more people to take public money out for their kids, pull their kids from the public schools, put them into private schools. They're going to have to pay a little bit of the difference, but they'll shift that public money over there. We can divest, we can get rid of the teachers unions because the private schools don't have to have that. We can eliminate the school boards, so there's no public, we don't have to worry about the public accountability aspect of it. We don't have to worry about as much funding for some of these other things. And then as the public schools continue to fail, you can use that continued failure, it's a feature now, not a glitch, as justification to continue to defund them further, to give up on them. So it's interesting to me that Nate can plot the conspiratorial course of Stacy Davis Gates' motivations about why she leaves her kids in public school. It's because she's trying to burnish her credentials with her union buds. But the fact that conservative politicians and advocates have been pushing for school choice vouchers and these kinds of programs specifically because they benefit them politically as conservative Republicans, because they're anti-union and they're anti-public school in general. And just in general, just a basic idea behind a lot of conservative and sort of pro-market things. You see a chain of money, right? An income stream going from the public to a particular segment in the economy. There's a particular interest in there in being able to capture that and take it over. And that's essentially what school choice vouchers are at a very cynical level.
Left, right? Throw it to identity politics. Whenever you don't have an argument, just scream racism and it makes your point, right? People are going to say, oh, yeah, it is racism. And then you'll have some sympathy, right? It essentially.
I find that ironic because what he's saying is she said that private schools were racist and put her kid in there. So therefore she's a hypocrite. He's using that as a way to bolster his claim that she's a hypocrite. She didn't say private schools were racist. This seems like it lacks a little self-awareness here.
They're trying to win an argument just by using identity politics. So what CNN did.
Yes, I agree. It does seem like someone here is employing identity politics just to win an argument.
Which is shocking. I'm going to say CNN's been shocking. They've been having these great interviews. Is that they held her feet to the fire. They said, okay, we're going to have you on and we're going to have you explain why this policy is racist. So let's look at this interview from CNN.
Tonight, the head of the Chicago Teachers Union is facing intense backlash after it was revealed that her eldest son is enrolled in a private Catholic school. Now, the reason that this is at all controversial for some people is because Stacy Davis Gates has championed the city's public school system while consistently voicing strong opposition to private education. Now, last year, she underscored her position on the issue, saying, quote, I can't advocate on behalf of public education without it taking root in my own household. And joining me now is Stacy Davis.
I find this fascinating.
See? I got that clip. You heard her say it yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that all you guys have kind of played along with. This is the thing that bothers me about this the most, right? Nate is usually here for his audience to tell them, like, Nate's got your back. Nate can figure out the narrative. Nate can criticize the media narrative, and he can pull it out there and analyze it. But all I see him doing in this case is flowing right along with the conservative narrative. This CNN host is doing the exact same thing. Well, she's made these disparaging claims about private schools. Where? That quote, the quote that they just put up there on screen is not a disparaging anything about private schools.
So,
Gates. Stacy, thank you for being here. We wanted to have you on so you could help explain what happened here. You've likened...
Well, that's a nice... So we brought you on here to explain yourself. So go ahead and explain yourself. So why are private schools all racist?
In the past, private schools of today to, quote, segregation academies of the Jim Crow South. Why then send your child to a private school?
Yeah, they played that one pretty quick. The segregation academy she's talking about are private schools and voucher programs. She's talking about private schools that benefit from voucher programs and things like charter academies.
After speaking out so publicly against them.
I didn't speak out against private schools. I spoke out against school choice. School choice and private schools are two different entities.
Yep.
In your tweet, you describe basically you describe private schools of the North. That was literally your language. But you've also said this, that school choice was the choice of racists. I think at the end of the day, people are asking here about whether the rhetoric matches your actions. What do you say to them?
None of them have been able to paraphrase accurately what she's saying. None of them. So I think that's interesting. Well, you know what? People are talking about your rhetoric, and they're a little concerned. They don't think that your rhetoric matches your actions. What about her rhetoric doesn't match her actions? If she was saying that private schools were, in fact, all racist and then goes and enrolls her kid in a private Catholic school, agreed. Hypocritical, cancel her, or at least drum her out of the Chicago Teachers Union. But she didn't say that private schools were racist. And Abby here on CNN is still, pardon my French, fucking the pooch on this one. Just royally, just fucking it hard.
CNN hit her a couple of times. Let's see what she wrote.
Not worth chortling about here, Nate. This is a royal pooch screw.
It can come up. It says school choice was actually a choice of racists. It was created to avoid integrating black children. Now it's the civil rights struggle of our generation, right? So that's what she's saying. The civil rights struggle of a generation. Remember what she's actually saying.
School choice, not the existence of private schools. School choice policy.
Saying is sending black kids to schools that are not failing is racist.
Wrong, Nate. Wrong. That is not what she's saying, and he fucking knows better. How did you paraphrase that from that tweet?
That's what she's saying.
That is not what she's saying.
That's her position.
It is not.
Let's see how she cleans it up.
Well, I would say that if we understand the desegregation of schools post Brown v. the Board of Education, we also understand that school districts in the South in particular closed down entire school districts, offered money to families, white families so they could get accepted into private schools. That is, in fact, the origin of school choice in America. And I know that the right wing wants to obscure that in the same way that they want to tell us that slavery was a job training program.
Now, I do want to say this.
Okay, a little bit of a dig there. All right, we'll see.
What she's trying to do is equivocate, right? She's trying to say, well, because some people use it in a racist way in the South, that's the reason why it's all racist today. But that's just not true. What she's saying is just not true. Recently, it has been found that the most racist and segregated school system in America is the one in New York City. You want receipts? Watch this.
A new report by
Okay, and isn't it overwhelmed? I mean, isn't it overwhelmed with charter schools? I don't know if this is going to go well for him.
UCLA and the Civil Rights Project in UCLA says that New York is actually the most segregated states when it comes to their public education system. So that's kind of surprising because a lot of people would make the assumption that it's actually in the South, but their data proves otherwise. Let me tell you exactly what they found. In New York City, the largest school system in the U.S. with 1.1 million pupils, the study notes that many of the charter schools created over the last dozen years are among the least diverse of all, with less than 1% white enrollment at 73% of the charter schools, which is insane.
So most people thought that the South, as what she's saying, the South would have the most segregated school system in America, but it's...
Okay, so if New York is starting to see a segregation where 73% of student enrollment in the charter schools are minority students, or students of color, versus what, all the white kids are going to the public schools? Like, I don't know.
It's not. It's actually the North. And the reason for that is that during the civil rights movement and the will to try to integrate schools, the focus was on the South. So the South was forced to integrate by the federal government, but the North, which was thought to already be integrated, didn't have to do all of those things that the South.
I don't know that this is entirely true. I think there was a little bit of this happening even in some northern states, at least in the Midwest. I don't know. I can't speak for New York, but this sounds like a little bit of that kind of grandpa piece in history together from the back of sugar packets kind of thing. I think this is really kind of glossing over some stuff, but let's see where he goes with this.
I've had to do. So technically, as of right now, the most integrated school systems in America are in the South, and the least integrated school systems in America are in the Northeast, in places like Chicago and New York. So her policies,
by virtue of the charter schools, according to what the clip TYT played, all the children from parents of color, people of color, they're all getting shuffled into charter schools. So like the white, so all the, I mean, I guess should we conclude then that in New York, it's the majority of white kids are attending failing public schools? I don't understand where he's going here, because there's a lot of context missing from this.
What she's advocating for is actually the racist policies. Interesting, huh?
History.
How is she advocating for a racist policy? He hasn't actually said other than like, well, you're just denying people the right to choose. No, she's not. She's against policies that would allow parents to collect that public money and use that as a voucher towards towards a private school that's looking to eagerly hoover that up, instead of making sure direct funding of public schools gets done so that those schools aren't failing. Preventing that kind of, it's sort of like an engineered white flight kind of thing, but just happening with schools. You just provide an incentive to parents, gin up a narrative saying, oh, all these public schools. Usually the thing isn't that public schools are bad. In some areas you can say like, oh yeah, these schools are not doing good. They're underfunded, but even when they were funded at a normal level, they were still doing poorly. You just remind people that, oh, these places are terrible and they can't be fixed because they're public schools. Remember, this is one of the things that conservatives usually leave out. It's not that public education does fail. It's that public education ideologically must fail because it's a government program. If you're kind of a pro-capitalist, especially like sort of the anarcho-capitalist type, where you really believe that anything the government touches just turns into an unmitigated, disaster, then it's not that public schools can get bad. It's that public schools are bad from the jump. And you don't want to taint your kids with this. They leave that stuff out when they get into this kind of stuff. That motivates a lot of pro-school choice policy advocates. Because if they had their way, and keep in mind, many of them are also kind of the rabid homeschoolers, Christian fundy types, right? They want to make sure that their kids can be removed from those demonic, satanic schools that would teach their kids the worldly things that they want to insulate from them. And that gives them the ability to take some of that public money and enroll their kids in a school where, Jesus hates gay people. essentially. If you think that I'm being unfair, please remember my roots. Raised as a homeschooler, dealt with parents that actually did help run a conservative Christian academy for a few years before the church attached to it went under, saw and worked with that rhetoric, with their curriculum, and it was exactly that.
That you're talking about, and I myself attended public school my entire life. But I think one of the issues here is actually something that you yourself raised. You wrote a letter to your colleagues and you said that our critics want you to believe that, quote, school choice is a black and white issue that lacks nuance and hard choices for people like us, black families, especially when you are parenting a black boy in America. You wrote that to explain why you chose to take your child out of public school for a sports program at a private school. The question I think your critics are asking is why not afford that nuance to the families who might live in the south side of Chicago and in other major cities, and they want the same choice that you were able to afford to give to your child?
Well, I guess this will be an interesting case, right? Because normally in a capitalist economy, the fact that she has the cash to do this means that that's the choice. This is an interesting thing because you want to turn the schools over to market forces and make them compete. Well, we'll give them something to compete. Give the public schools something to compete with. We'll shift that public money into them, give you a coupon so that you can go and when people decide, it turns it into a marketplace, and they'll abandon the public schools, and that'll be the market proving us correct. Okay. The problem with this is that it normally doesn't work, and the other problem behind that is that usually there's not the efficiency there that they claim. Education is a cost, and it usually doesn't make you profits. For her case, though, I think it's interesting she's being put on this. Like, hey, why don't you explain this? Explain yourself here. Why? She has the capacity to do this. She and her husband can afford it, and they're going to do this for their son. If anything, what this illustrates, how many people who don't have this kind of money can't put their kid in this school, even in a voucher? Because the one thing that Nate makes it seem like, and a lot of these pro voucher programs make it sound like, well, hey, you know what? If these programs are running, then any kid can go to the best school. No, they can't. Most of them don't get into it. Most of them will not get into it, and then they're stuck in a failing school that's even more defunded than before. A lot of those schools end up working under kind of a Matthew principle. These kids are smart. Let's put them in the best school so that they can be even smarter and better prepared than before. These kids, a little bit dim. Let's lock them in a closet and keep them in the dark like mushrooms, right? And they'll just get worse, right? Those that have gain more. Those that lack lose it all. Matthew principle, baby, right? And it's a powerful component in a kind of a corporate mentality, capitalist economy like we have, and it seems to be running roughshod here. Maya says something happened in New York, therefore it's a racist policy everywhere. Did he forget how to logic? Yeah, exactly. And the idea of showing the kind of statistics there, from TYT, where it's showing like, okay, so the charter schools have, now that these charter schools exist in New York, it sounds like they're actually getting kind of segregated, as a matter of like policy or demand or something. Like what's going on there. There are good books written about this. It's a very complicated topic. There's a reason that a lot of teachers unions and education advocates are very outspoken against school choice programs and vouchers, because of what it does to the public education in general, and what it does to the funding for it. Generally, we end up. Private school vouchers basically have all of the necessary ingredients to do to education in America what private insurance has done to our healthcare. We will pay 2 to 3 times more for the service than any other country and get half or a third of the quality of someplace else. They can roll this out as fast as they want. They could do this as much as they want. They'd end up getting the exact. My belief, my guess is that that's what would happen. We pay per person the most in healthcare of any other people in any other country, and in some of those developed countries combined. And we don't get the healthcare results, and individuals don't get the same level or qualities of service, or even varieties of services.
Now, before she answers, just to let you understand, the hypocrisy here is because the CNN host is totally correct, right? You can afford school choice, because that's what school choice is about. It's about giving poor people the ability to afford to send their kids to better schools. And she can do that. She's got a 6-figure salary. She's the head of the teachers union. She can afford to do that. But the poor children who are in those neighborhoods can't do that.
Right. But the idea that a voucher school or a charter school that's getting that public money is going to rescue those kids out of that situation isn't really the solution either, because there's not enough room in those schools to get absolutely all those kids out of the failing schools. And the vouchers, on top of taking public money away from the public schools, are charging usually a tuition. Usually there's a difference left over. So the parents are now paying something out of pocket for that education as well. And there are parents who could end up in a situation where their kid could get into one of those schools, can't afford to pay the difference. That happens in some of these areas too. And if this increases, you can bet that the amount of public funding going into these private charter schools that take that money and the differences they charge will increase, as long as they can kind of market it that way. Normally it would be $32,000 a year to attend this school. But with the voucher, now it's $16,000. So you need to pony it up. Like I said in the first video, the school that she's sending her son to costs $16,000 per year, which I'm thinking, if for Chicago, is probably on the slightly less expensive side. I can think of Catholic schools in my area, and I mentioned this before, and I'm in a relatively small part of Michigan, not high demand here, not a high population concentration. Private schools around here would cost more than that, Catholic or otherwise. So this has always been an issue. Yeah, the idea that the charter schools are somehow going to be like, oh, well, hey, she's denying that choice for them. No, she's not. Do you know who denies the choice to attend a charter school? The charter school. They don't have problems saying no to kids attending their school. They exclude a lot of students.
So she's living on both sides of the sword, right? She's saying, well, I can afford to do so. I'm going to do that, give my kid the best possible opportunity. But those other black and poor people, I want to keep them deaf, dumb, and blind, and I want to keep them in those failing schools.
Spoken like a charter school representative, Nate.
Because it helps me, it helps my family, and it helps us get that money, right? And
it helps them get that money, because as long as they have a failing school to point to, it's an example. It drives the demand and the narrative that they can be your hero. All you got to do is petition the governments for some of that that federal aid, and then pay us a little bit extra, because that coupon takes care of only so much. Now give us $4,000, $5,000 a year, and then watch that money go. Watch that price tag slowly tick up.
Helps my position to get that money. It's not about the true racist here. It's her, right? If she was white saying this, we'd say, oh, it's obvious she's a racist. But she's black, so she can have the position of, let your child, your beautiful black and brown child, fail.
That is not at all the point she's making. Not even close.
Because if they don't, we don't get any money, and you're the racist.
How does she not get any money? The public schools aren't going anywhere, and the teachers union isn't going anywhere.
A couple of things. Number one, I have 3 children, and all 3 children have attended public school, and my youngest 2 are still public school students. The second thing is that over 90% of my neighbors in my zip code send their children into schools outside of our zip code, outside of our neighborhood. And this is an issue that black Chicagoans, black families in Chicagoans deal with on a very regular basis, and in fact for generations. This is not an issue of just Stacy Davis Gates and her family. Quite frankly, this is an issue especially for middle-class black families all across this country, where the public accommodation is obsolete, just like the grocery store in our communities is obsolete, just like the healthcare provisions in our community are obsolete. What I am saying, and what we have said very clearly as a union for a very long time now, is that the public accommodation has to be invested and resourced in black communities, because we have been defunded and destabilized in those same communities. So when we talk about choice, Abby, what we're talking about is a decision between Frosted Flakes and Cheerios. But in Chicago, and especially in black neighborhoods, it's a decision with 0 and 0. And that's not a choice. That is, quite frankly, an ultimatum.
See, what is she talking about? What is she talking about? The choice is, right, just to make it very clear, she just was speaking nonsense.
No, she's not. I'll lay this out. So if you put this in private hands with education, and you basically use private vouchers as a way to kind of defund the public education that's there, what you're going to end up getting are education deserts. And they have those in Chicago. And they have those with the charter schools and private schools they have now, because the funding's not working out correctly. So with that in place, what you end up having are people being forced to choose between, they have no good options. here. And with the charter schools in place, they don't necessarily have that as an option either. The one thing that Nate doesn't bring up is the number. Some of these charter schools in some of these communities, usually, if they're performing well, will break even with their equivalent public school, and that's not factoring into the fact. So, okay, now what you've got is a more expensive education delivery vehicle. It's probably costing the parent a little bit extra. The public money is going there directly. It's not paying for a school board. There's no school board in place, so you don't have that. You don't have special ed needs taken care of. None of that is available to you. And if your kid gets in trouble and gets expelled or disciplined, there's very little a parent can do to actually object to that. Now, again, in some cities and some states, they might have laws written into it. If you accept the public benefit as a school or voucher or charter school, then you have to be willing to accept this much, public accountability or something like that. But my understanding of it from what I've read, generally those schools are less receptive to input from the public as opposed to a school board. A school board has to be accountable to the public. A private school doesn't have to be. And in a lot of cases, what charter schools usually are actively fighting for is we can take this public money and we can provide a better education. We can do it better, but we don't want to be held to the same level of accountability as a public school. We're not going to have a school board. We're not going to deal with that stuff. That's a problem. Let's see where he goes with this to try to. I'm interested to see how he's going to paraphrase what she said.
Choice would be, here is the money. This is how much money the state is going to spend on your child to educate them. You're giving it to your parents. You take that and put your child in the best possible school for you. If that's inside your zip code, if that's outside your zip code, if the public school is the best place for your child, you send them there. And giving the parents the power to make that decision, right? Just like for the grocery store, right? If your local grocery store isn't up to par, you're going to go to another one, right? Right? You don't have to go to the one grocery store. So she's advocating for choice, right? Hey, the grocery stores in my neighborhood. 90% of the people don't send the kids to the ones in our zip code, right? That makes sense if you can afford to go to other places. But that's the issue, though. See, the people who are trapped are the people who can't afford to go to other grocery stores. The people who are trapped are the people who can't afford to send their kids to private schools. And she's okay with keeping those people trapped because, again, she's the head of the teachers union. They're going to get that money.
No, I don't think she's okay with that. He's brought this up before because, and other right wingers have brought this up. The idea of I don't know if he's ever done one on it. I know he's talked about the shoplifting thing, but in terms of like school, food deserts in some of these communities, you literally have in some of these places where our food distribution is entirely controlled by private markets, and generally the idea behind it's not a high profit margin activity, but it's stable. If you have a residential area, people need to buy groceries. You set up a shop there. As long as it's decently managed, you will not make big money, but you will make consistent profit over time, depending on how well it's managed. But again, low profit margin kind of thing. What you're starting to find are a lot of these places, a lot of the chains shutting down. Target's been doing this, and I think Kroger. I think Kroger's shut down a few. Have been closing down these locations. Oftentimes, when asked, they just cite crime, right? Oftentimes, it's loss. And really what it usually comes down to is what you're starting to see is that it's not making enough of a profit for the area that they projected that it would. They put it in an area, probably thought it was going to get bougified, gentrified, whatever, and it didn't. And so now they've got to adjust, and it's just, they'd rather pack up and leave and put it someplace else where they can chase more money. That is a failure of capitalism. Capitalism will do that if your entire production and distribution method is based on capitalists and privateers sticking something somewhere where they can maximize profit. It's not necessarily the most efficient place to put it. Education is not going to work much better. And in most of the cases when they're trying to chase these kinds of programs around, people have been advocating for charter schools and public voucher programs in Chicago for a very long time. And I think probably for at least 20 years, since before I even went to college. And to me, it seems like the situation in Chicago has not gotten any better, even though, from what I understand, the number of charter and private schools that accept those kinds of vouchers and things has increased. And it just seems like this is getting worse and worse. And the number of kids in more failing schools has increased. This is not like Nate seems to be talking about this like, well, these are the solution to the problem. And the only thing holding this back is the teachers union. No. Teacher, like, at what point in any dispute in society have unions? I mean, unions can slow this kind of stuff down, but they rarely stop it dead in its tracks. The invest in kids thing, they might actually stop. We'll find out when they vote on it. I think they vote on it next month. We'll see. But a lot of the stuff they just try to hold back the dam. But a lot of the stuff, usually when some free market libertarian type wants to push some kind of advocacy like this, and you get assholes excited about money, that usually trumps common sense, empathy, efficiency. Yeah, all that's going to be gone. But he keeps trying to impugn her motives with this, like she's just about preserving her role as the Chicago Teachers Union president, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like she's actually an advocate and an activist for public education. She wants to see it funded more. She wants to see those institutions be improved on and succeed and provide the same services, if not more services, than any of the private competitors pretend that they can, offer at a more competitive price. Newsflash, they can't. It will cost everybody a lot more money if you think the private school is going to be able to provide those services to them. And they, again, I can't emphasize this enough, they exclude a lot of kids.
What all this is about? The teachers union getting money.
Black children in the city of Chicago travel outside of their neighborhoods on average 2 hours more than any other comparative demographic.
I totally understand the point that you're making, but I do wonder, do you regret your own rhetoric here?
Regret rhetoric. What I've said are facts. Again, I'm a history teacher.
I think that the rhetoric that
Abby,
let me explain my question. Let me just explain
I understand quite clearly
what I'm asking is that you're describing a very nuanced issue here. I understand that. I understand the history of.
Right. Stacy Davis Gates is doing the stupid thing and trying to apply nuance to this. What she should have opened up with immediate was like, you guys have attributed my rhetoric to being, I said all private schools were racist. I didn't say that. What's your question? And if Abby comes back with, well, your rhetoric seems to be that, are you going to tell me that my rhetoric was I hate all private schools because they're all racist? Not my position, not my sentiment, not my statement. What's your question? If you're going to criticize somebody's rhetoric, you need to come prepared and get it right. And this woman has presented it as poorly as Nate has. Nate's doing it and it seems to be super enthusiastic about doing it because it can paint her in the worst possible light imaginable. And I think that Nate's probably got something against teachers or teachers unions. Again, kind of suspicious to me because he's former law enforcement. I'm willing to bet that he was part of a police union.
Segregation in the school system, but at the same time, what I'm trying to ask you is, do you think that your rhetoric at some point went too far when you are making a choice, because perhaps, I assume you can afford to do that a lot of...
What was her rhetoric? The accusation, well, they're saying that your rhetoric went too far. Aren't you worried that your rhetoric went too far? What was her rhetoric, Abby?
Chicago parents don't, because they can't afford it. And proponents of school choice say the state should have a role in helping those families who can't afford it make the same choice that you did for your family.
The state should have a role. Yeah, okay. Well, here's the thing. The state's role should be to fund the schools. That's the way that you do it. And you have the ability to choose from those public institutions. Or you can send your kids to private schools. The idea that, like, hey, what the states really need to be able to do is take money that would be directed towards the public schools and funnel it over to these private schools, following a narrative coming from a lot of right-wing grifters that are telling people that, hey, your kid's gonna grow up to be a loser at best or a criminal at worst if they stay in the failing public schools. Take advantage of these voucher programs, enroll your kid in Success Magnets Academy, whatever, LLC over here, and your kid will be a test-taking genius and get into Harvard. The reality is neither one of those things are true, but that seems to be what they're kind of offering people. And in the United States, there's a very real reason why you have to be aware of the phrase, there's a sucker born every minute, because there's a lot of people in this country who are motivated and are actively engaging in business based on that principle. And I really do think they're doing that here. And Abby here seems to be like, well, hey, you're trying to be nuanced about this. You're trying to, talk about this kind of thing. But what about people being able to choose where they go to schools? What about it? What about that? If you have a society where you have public schools for everybody and then private schools for a select few wealthy people, what does that say about your class issues going forward? That issue is not going to get talked about. Why can't working people afford private school? Why is that?
So a couple of things, Abby. It is nuanced in Chicago. Like I've said, we have been destabilized and defunded in our Black communities. When people speak of choice, they are speaking of two different things that are of comparative nature. What we are faced with in Chicago is an absence of a choice. It's an absence of resources.
She is right. It's an absence of a choice. She's advocating that parents do not have a choice. That's what she's advocating for. Really think.
No, she's not. She's trying to illustrate, Nate, Jesus Christ. She's trying to illustrate that if you can defund the schools and make them so bad, there is no equivalent. There's no choice. There's no direct equivalency. All the public schools, as Nate said, all of them are bad, and all the charter schools, therefore, are good and successful. And so that's where all the parents need to send their kids. I don't see why this doesn't seem hard to follow, and it seems like Chicago really does have an issue with this, especially when you look at the transportation rates that kids have to do. In some cases, I remember somebody saying something like some of these kids are transported 2 to 3 hours each way to various schools of their quote unquote choice.
Think about it, people. Matter of fact, you want to know who actually was pro school choice? Al Sharpton and Newt Gingrich.
Horrible examples. This is hilarious. Newt Gingrich, corrupt. Al Sharpton, so what? Oh, these guys were they're pro school choice. What difference does this make?
Both were going around the country advocating Republican, Newt Gingrich, Democrat, Al Sharpton. You know how these men hate each other politically? They were going around saying
they're friends. They're friends. They did a Super Bowl ad together.
We need school choice. We need school choice for the Black community. And you know who also supported it? Obama. So if you're saying Al Sharpton and Obama are racist against Black people because they support school choice, then you're wrong.
No one said that. Nate just said that. So what Nate just did here is something that I mentioned in my first video. If you make a structural criticism about school choice policies and indicate that in the past, school choice voucher programs and things like that were grounded in racism, then anyone who comes along now and says they are supportive of some kind of related school choice program, you are making the same accusation against them personally, that they're racist, that you were making about school choice as a policy structurally. That doesn't follow. Do you know what does follow? Hey, I don't like school voucher programs because they're grounded in racist ideology and racist sentiments. And I think that the way they're administered is probably inevitably corrupt. And these seem to be the results. It's pretty obvious to me that they're bad. Barack Obama comes along and says, I heard a private school voucher program that I really like. What follows is not Obama is therefore racist. What follows is Obama might be wrong, or you don't agree with Obama. It is this is blatantly this is completely irresponsible. Are you trying to say that those guys are all racist because they support school choice? In Newt Gingrich's case, yes. In Al Sharpton's case, maybe. In Barack Obama's, who knows? Maybe two. But that's not what follows from that. I don't know that they're individually racist. Well, Newt Gingrich is. But at least a lot of policy that he supported in the past as a politician was some blatant bullshit. I'm sure somebody will come along and be like, but Newt Gingrich is married to a Black woman. Do with that what you will. But yeah, this is sad.
Or wrong. So think about this, people. The Republicans support school choice. The Democrats support school choice, right? Obama, Sharpton.
No, not all Democrats support school choice. A lot more of them did, I think, back around this time in the mid to late 90s. This might have been in the aughts, though. I'm not sure when this was. Sharpton had lost the weight. Maya says, what Nate just did here was make up a wild-ass, baseless accusation for views. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
But you know who doesn't support school choice? The teachers union, the Democratic teachers unions, who want to keep their money, who want to keep their funding, who want to keep those millions of dollars rolling in. They don't support it. And the reason why they don't support it is because if your child in that failing school has the ability to go to a school that is not failing, that's dollars out of their pocket. That's the plain and simple truth of it. And this was all...
No, actually, here's what happens. What generally ends up happening is the way to use private school vouchers as a wedge to dismantle teachers' unions is a way to justify paying teachers less, reducing their benefits, increasing their workload beyond what it already is, and generally turning the teaching profession into something worse than being a beat cop, which has been sort of the operating tendency for the last 15 to 20 years, I think, at this point. That seems to be the goal. The reason that teachers' unions are hated is because teachers' unions fight against bullshit shenanigans. There's nothing excites a bunch of bros, especially right-wing conservative policy bros, like telling them that you can create a market-based economic competitive model thing that can compete with anything, insert anything here, but in this case, public schools, and it will not only be better and more competitive and more efficient and save money, maybe make money, but all your kids are going to turn into little geniuses on top of it. And you watch these guys literally glaze over, their eyes are replaced with dollar signs, and they just start funneling money into any of these various education initiatives, usually private companies, in order to get this off the ground because they smell money. That's it. There's a revenue of public money being directed it's being drawn out of the population and being directed into the government for a service. If you can insert yourself in the middle of that income stream, then you have a guaranteed income stream, and then you can start making changes and start privatizing it. And the goal to do that, decrease efficiency and decrease accountability, decrease transparency. Essentially, what you want is an education system that looks a lot like health insurance companies. The inefficiency is the model. And if you guys think that I'm talking out of my ass, or this is just left-wing fear-mongering, it isn't. If you've ever dealt with health insurance, even on a good day, or dealt with some of these education initiatives that deal with this kind of stuff, you kind of see the same tendencies coming through. It's usually people excited that they can turn some kind of public service into a bonanza, into a little gold rush. And once they get excited about that, it's very, very hard to turn that off. You have to kind of let the frenzy finish. And usually the only way that frenzy finishes is with injury, personal loss, massive disappointment, which conservatives are also excellent at providing. Just give them time.
Over the news. But again, things have gotten a lot more political, so it's kind of going the way of the dodo.
Country has been.
Okay, he just kind of blew that off. The reason why a lot of those initiatives went, and it was something that I mentioned before, George W. Bush was a big proponent of this and wanted to do a federal initiative when he got elected. He put together a team, and I mentioned this in the first video beforehand. In fact, I think I just said that twice now. When they put this program together and put the initiative behind it, what the study found by the time everything was said and done, and George W. Bush was really looking forward to it because he was very, very excited. I think he was one of these guys that's like, this is the future. Like Joe Scarborough's quote in the first video too, that Nate had, just really excited. This is the future of education. It's a revolution in providing education to our kids. It's going to be the future. It's going to, it's going to improve everything. It didn't. It didn't. And there was testing even before that 2008, 2009 clip of Joe Scarborough getting all excited about it. Back when George W. Bush was in, and I think it was in his first term, the group that he put together found that the most effective expenditure of money on schools was direct federal and state expenditures pumped straight into public schools. That got the best bang for the buck. Not voucher programs, not redirection programs, not this, not that, none of that. No. Simplify it, reduce it. You have public education, you got better schools, better funded, better pay for teachers. You get better results. It was such a simple result and so common sense. It was almost like they didn't need the study at all. But they did. And after that, a lot of this kind of stuff kind of started to fizzle. But where you do see a lot of this advocacy seems to be at the local levels, where budgets are strapped. See, for the federal government, if it really wanted to turn schools around, it could just open up the spigot wide and just start dumping money into the schools because the federal government can deficit spend. A lot of states can't deficit spend. Some can, most can't. And so they have to make sure that everything balances out. And they can't do that with these schools. And so the idea of having a private institution come in and sort of make up that stopgap can become very compelling for certain politicians because there's something kind of sweetly enticing about it. Like, hey, you're a public administrator, a public representative, and you're dealing with this issue of your state providing public education, quality public education to kids. Well, what if we told you this? What if, as a private institution, we could come in and, as a turnkey operation, practically, we'll take over these buildings. We'll build some of our own buildings. We'll start our own schools. As long as you funnel the federal funding per student over to us, we'll run these schools for you, and we'll call it school choice. Brilliant, right? Until those schools don't run them well, right? Because there's administrative costs, and education is a kind of a money sink. So,
Anchored to a
sorry about that tangent. We went on too long there.
very racist and angry right wing. I can show you a whole host of emails that have come to me and my family detailing that level of violence and racism. So if the choice movement does want to move away from their angry and violent rhetoric, I might add.
You see? She has no substance here. She said, I get a couple of emails that are racist, so that means the school choice people are all racist.
Was that her point? Don't think so.
She's flailing here, people. She has no argument, unless she's calling Al Sharpton a racist.
She's flailing here? She's been called out for rhetoric she didn't use repeatedly. And for the most part, I would add, most of this has gone nowhere. This really doesn't seem to. If anything, this kicked off about a month, 5 weeks ago. The reason that it did was probably because conservatives are really petitioning to make sure that Invest in Kids thing passes, because it looks like it might fail. So the best way to do that is to gin up a controversy like this, little tempest in a teacup. Hey, you know what? President of the Chicago Teachers Union is a raging hypocrite. Vote for Invest in Kids, so that you can have a great big trough of public subsidized tax write-off money. Perfect for wealthy types who, need even more tax breaks.
She's calling Barack Obama a racist, right? Those are the people who advocate for school choice. Are they racist too? See, it would be easy to call Newt Gingrich a racist, right? Oh, he's an easy racist, right? He's white. It's obvious. But Obama and Sharpton, they advocate for school choice. Are they the racist too?
For the last time, Nate, no. It doesn't follow that they are, and it doesn't follow that someone's accusing them of that. It doesn't follow that if somebody makes a structural criticism and concludes that a policy has something racist, has a racist component to it, that people that support it or are kind of intrigued by it or think that it might be a good idea are also just, by extension, racist themselves. They might not know what the critic knows. They've heard a sales pitch and they're like, hey, what I've heard, it sounds good. The thing to conclude there is you just disagree with them and you think that they're wrong about it. Like, yeah, let me explain why this is maybe a bad idea.
Favor and reject the rhetoric of the right that tells us that history is not important. I understand the impact of segregation in Chicago, the impact of destabilization in Chicago, and I face that along with over 90% of my neighbors, and that the school that is supposed to be down the street for the cop that lives across the street from me, or the retired teacher and her family that lives next door to me, that's not afforded to us. So when we talk about rhetoric, we also have to talk about the historical record, and the historical record is very clear. The school choice movement was a cudgel for integration in this country. That is a fact.
So Sharpton.
Okay. Pretty strong words there coming from Stacy Davis Gates. We'll see what happens here. Maya says, did he read that somewhere? Did he glean the information from conducting his own representative sample? Or did he make it up? Yeah, who knows, Maya? Who knows? Dustin says, yeah, we have the same companies that run private prisons run those schools too. Yeah. Yikes. Let's see here. Jay writes, let's see, maybe Nate should have switched tactics and criticized her for her jewelry when that money could go to paying for her kids' quote unquote racist education. Yeah, I'm kind of expecting them to say that. Like, well, isn't she wearing a lot of necklaces there? Those earrings look kind of flash too. Like, what's going on there? That would be the old, oh, you don't like capitalism, huh? Well, then do the consistent thing and smash your iPhone or Android phone right now. Like, no. Okay, let's get back to Nate here. He started saying Al Sharpton and
Obama are racist because they are asking for school choice.
No, for the last time. Stop. This is childish. This is childish of Nate. He should knock this shit off.
You see, just because something has bad origins doesn't mean that it's working today in the same way, right?
True, but in a lot of cases, it's actually been just it hasn't been. It's not like they like ironed out the racism. It's more like they kind of refined it. Like this idea that like, oh, well, just because it was racist then doesn't mean it's racist now. Maybe, maybe not. But here's the problem with the school choice program. You're basically trying to funnel money away from public schools, and usually a lot of the fear mongering being done is that those schools over there are failing. And how do they go about? What do they do to show that the schools are failing? They usually show a school that they all they have to do is show pictures of schools where the majority of the students are kids of color, and then let the kind of white audiences fill in the blanks and conclude, well, that school must have a lot of crime. I'm, I know somebody's probably going to get turned off by this and say, like, oh, come on, that's not what happens. It fucking does. As a white guy raised in a conservative household for years, I know it works because it worked on me. It worked on me for years. Not only did it work on me, I would turn around and echo it. That's precisely the kind of rhetoric that gets pulled.
Let's say, for instance, somebody created a car, or Henry Ford created the car because he was a violent racist. Does that mean every car today is perpetuating that racism? No, obviously that's ridiculous, right? And that's the argument she's making. But if
no, it isn't. Again, like Nate is just volunteering rhetorical points to state, well, this is the point she's making. This is the argument she's making. No, it isn't. But you participate in capitalism? I'm curious. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't if I didn't have to, but I'm also smart enough to know that capitalism and markets aren't the same thing. So, yeah.
The argument was we're only giving school choice to white kids. That's one thing. But the argument here is we're trying to give school choice to black kids to send them to those good white schools. And that's what she's against. She's against the integration that she's.
How did he get there? When did the failing school? What's the difference in the fail? I thought all Chicago schools were failing. Is it the case that all the Chicago schools are failing except for the charter schools and stuff, and those are all happen to be white? This is interesting because the TYT article that I thought he showed was showing that how the charter schools were becoming predominantly black, or at least predominantly minority populations, minority students. So I'm not exactly sure what the point that he's now trying to claim that, well, this is Stacy Davis Gates. This is the rest of her rhetorical swing. She doesn't want these people to be able to choose. She wants them to be stuck in those schools. It's pretty easy for Nate to say that when she's actually coming on CNN and saying those parents are stuck in those schools and they don't have a choice. It's almost as if the kind of liberal here and the conservative are talking past each other at this point. And Nate's not doing anything to kind of deflate or really analyze this media narrative. He started out with the New York Post, Fox News style media narrative, and he's just running with it. Yeah, where did that come from? Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah.
Trying to pretend exists today. She's against it because don't forget those failing black schools are like 95% black kids, 95% minority kids. Very few white kids, if any, go to those failing schools. But if you want those black students to get out of those failing schools and go to the schools that aren't failing, that's where she has a problem.
Number two.
She hasn't said that she has a problem with that, Nate. You can't even draw that connection or that entailment from any of the stuff that she said. She hasn't said anything about denying people the ability to send their kids to good schools. Like what Nate's concluding is like, there's no choice here. What Nate is actually doing something really interesting as far as it being an independent. If you didn't know any better, if you are not even like-minded, let's pretend, maybe he doesn't know this. If you are the anarcho-capitalist that assumes that public schools must always fail and be bad, then you can hear that whistle when Nate gives this kind of thing. Because then it's easy for them to just automatically, oh, of course, I don't want to keep my kid in the public school. Public equals bad. Public equals failing. Private or voucher or charter or magnet school equals good, and it's clever and economic and forward thinking and revolutionary, and it's not. It's just a new way to administer shunting public money into a private gain. That's it.
The destabilization of Black spaces throughout this country has been reprehensible and is most acutely felt with families who want to send their children to public schools. As I've said before, my children do attend public schools. My son, he has the opportunity to play sports at a school. Sports, by the way, that are not offered at our neighborhood school or any school close to our address.
So you see? So think about this. And really think about her argument here. If her son, if she didn't have this money and she was poor and she was Black, and her son, right, her son wanted to play sports and none of the schools around, would she be able to afford to send him to a private school?
No, she would be entertaining the one option that she mentioned in another interview where she sent her son out of town, Nate. He doesn't actually put that up there. If you look up these articles about this, you can actually find one where she's talking about, we weighed sending him to various private schools. We looked at other public schools. Public schools were clear on the other side of town, so we'd never be able to see him because the commute times were, 3 hours there and back again. The one that we thought might work for him would be to send him to live with his uncle, I think, in either a suburb or a town outside of Chicago. I think an hour outside of Chicagoland there. And it was a good school, decent district, but they wouldn't be able to see their son. They'd have to visit him on weekends or visit him on holidays. He'd effectively have to leave his family behind so that he could attend a decent high school. They considered that. There are other families in Chicago that have done that. And I'm kind of wondering right now, if she had done that, what would Nate's take be? Like, first of all, I don't think it ever would have come out because it'd be no real great way to spin that. Like, that family really sacrificed. I mean, they made sure that, rather than put that kid in a private school, she put him, she sent her son away. What's he going to say? Like, that's the kind of sacrifice that some families have to make on that side of Chicago. You don't have good schools. Maybe your kid has to go to a different town and live with a relative to go to a decent school. And it sounds like she and her husband were prepared to make that choice. It was an option on the table. But Nate's not talking about that.
We can have that opportunity? No. But the reason why she can do it is because she has school choice, right?
She doesn't have school choice. She has money, Nate. Everybody has school choice, but not everybody has money. That's the big secret to this entire fucking thing. The idea that working class people can't afford to send their kids to private schools is a feature, not a glitch, of our economy. And the idea that they now have to, this is an interesting conservative talking point now, because they're literally begging the government for money to go into for-profit schools. And they're doing it under the guise of like, well, this is just what's necessary for this. Imagine if they just like dropped this whole charade and just said, hey, what would be even better? Taking that money and funneling it into public schools. They never questioned the narrative. Why is it that the money shunted into a private school would be better spent than it being sent into a public school? Because you've internalized a marketing narrative from right-wingers that says public automatically is bad and private must mean good and fancy and slick. They're just playing on a prejudice, a bias, and a bad one at that. If you could funnel as much money into these things, just get rid of a lot of this administrative bloat and overhead that you get from some of these charter schools. Get rid of that and get the federal government to just dump money into these public schools and provide all the services and stuff that you're talking about. Really improve them. What would happen? You would remove the demand for these private school, private quote-unquote options. No one would want them because the federal government could do a great job of providing the service. No one would want a private competitor. And that would be a terrible thing because you want to be a private competitor that gets access to that federal money. Again, this is private capital interests looking at a flow of income and saying, I want to capture that income stream. I want to put myself right in the center of it and gobble it up. And ostensibly provide the same service, but I'm providing it in a private way. No, they're not. What they'll do is they'll put themselves in that position, gather up all the public money, and then, hat in hand, go to the public and be like, well, you need to pay us extra if you want the same quality of education. Costs go up every year. Inflation and such, the internet's. How many telecom companies do this? They get federal money, they get public money to go out and build up a new infrastructure to improve broadband. They squander that money. They use that money for buybacks. And then 3-4 years later, they're back in front of Congress, hat in hand, begging for more money in the interest of doing what? Improving infrastructure, something they were supposed to do 4 years prior, but didn't get around to it.
Her school choice is taking her own money and paying for him to go to a private school, right? That's the choice that she wants to deny that poor family. The same choice that she's taking right now.
Again, students in Chicago, especially black students, on average, travel almost 2 hours back and forth to school. So the real scandal, Abby, is why in 2023, black families in Chicago and across this country have to deal with such severe inequities and such high stakes.
I totally agree that that is a scandal, but I also think that what you just described for your son is choice.
It's the same choice that's always existed. This is so stupid. She's not against people being able to choose between public and private schools. I don't know any teachers union rep that is. President on down. If you want to send your kid to a private school, fine. But don't ask the government to give you a bailout for it. And this is the sickening hypocrisy of this thing. This concept should be anathema to any free market, bootstrap yourself conservative out there. I want my public education, but I want that money going to that private school for my kid. Because why? Do you think you're entitled? If they're a real conservative, they'd work hard and get the good job, the good paycheck, and they'd send their kid to a private school with no connections to the state. That's how a real conservative functions. Not like this. This is just some neoliberal kind of, dabbles in the marketplace kind of shit. It's just, vaguely, pretty blatantly corrupt, or at least corrupting. There's a million moral hazards with this kind of education setup. Public money into private schools so that they can make a profit kind of thing. No, it's a bad idea. If you just subsidize the schools, the government could run the schools directly. And if you believe in middlemen, God help you. You're bad at business too.
That's exactly what she described, right? That's CNN. You got to give CNN credit. Throw it to her right in the face. What you just described for your son was choice.
Wrong, Nate. What she just described was the one kind of choice, the kind of choice that people are supposed to be able to make in a free market, but can't in this country because they don't make enough money to pay that kind of tuition, because nobody earns that kind of money anymore. Capitalists make that kind of money. The wealthy can send their kids there. They have real school choice. And when she's talking about school choice programs, that's not really a choice. It's a private institution or private institutions usually ripping off public money to provide a lackluster service with less accountability and less transparency that costs the public more.
And that's what you deny to these other families.
That you made for your family, and I think that's what your critics are pointing out here. But Stacy Davis Gates, I do appreciate you coming on here tonight, and I also wanted to say that I'm sorry that your family has experienced threats as a result of all this. This is a discussion about policy choices.
Yeah, people will experience threats when their motives are impugned this way and when their rhetoric is blown out of proportion to imply that they're saying things that they're not. Like, I'm really sorry that your family would be going through this. It's almost as if the media turns you into a monster completely against your will. Yeah. So maybe apologize for saying that her rhetoric was out of whack when you couldn't get her rhetoric straight. You can take your apology and you can shove it up your ass. You need to be able to get this right. This is shit media. This isn't even good commentary. Like, I don't know who this woman is. My guess is she's a talking head and not an actual journalist. She's just one of their commentators or whatever, one of the anchors. This is crap journalism. Whoever put this piece together, whoever produced it, should probably be fired. Actually, more than likely, they probably were poached by CNN from Fox News. Fox News is good at this kind of weasel-worded bullshit. Maya writes, I hate CNN. They all know that school choice is a euphemism for dismantling public schools. Let's see. The public school system to keep the plebes stupid and usher back in segregation. Yeah, they would say that it doesn't do that. And I will correct you on this, Maya. The capital L libertarian types, they don't. They actually, the true believers think that, no, you don't understand. If we just get rid of the public education system and then free up all that tax money, what will appear out of the marketplace are glorious schools made with nothing but free choice and grit and innovation, and every kid will become Tony Stark or something, But libertarians are, basically like, they're like the D&D nerds of the economics world. So their opinions don't count. But I don't think they think it will lead to segregation. Now, some do. Some capital L libertarians are like, the segregation is the point. They don't, do whatever you want, pay for whatever you want. But most of them think that if you can just get rid of any kind of public funding for any kind of public provided service, the free market alternative that emerges from the marketplace will just be so much better and so much more efficient. And you won't see it coming. To them, I would point out the failure of grocery stores to stay put. The fact that food deserts are a thing now. We don't have state subsidized marketplaces to direct food, purchases for populations, but we're looking at having to possibly do that. Chicago is actually considering doing that because the private retail organizations that normally distributed that food and acted as the organizer and distribution node for those services are just basically deciding to get out of the game. So, yeah, way to go.
So I want to be very, very clear here. The thing that's holding back the black community is this woman. She's holding back the black community. She's holding back black children in Chicago.
Fuck that. No, she's not. Jesus, I don't even think Nate believes this shit. First of all, if you're going to make that accusation about a woman, get her rhetoric right, Nate, and you haven't proven that you've been able to do that. In fact, he's been giggling along with Abby Phillips while she's consistently gotten it as wrong as he and the New York Post and Fox News got her rhetoric beforehand. This is just completely unfair. This is bullshit. And the only reason Nate's doing this is because it popped up on right-wing news feeds. He capitalizes off it. He banks off the thing, plays this thing out. He has not covered this thing in that amount of time. I don't think anybody has picked up on her story in that amount of time. Maybe like a callback from like a story like a week or two ago. But for the most part, this was just done then, and it fizzled out of the news cycle until she popped up on CNN 3-4 days after the initial stories ran, and then gone. You can look her up and probably find some local news follow-ups on it, but not much. Just out of sight, out of mind, I guess, until the election hits. I wouldn't be surprised if they kick this up more in the next week or so leading up to the vote on Invest in Kids, but I really do think that the whole point of doing this is just to, gin up animosity towards teachers unions in hopes that that's going to support a positive vote for Invest in Kids. Maya writes, libertarians are stupid. I'm not convinced any had anything to do with the segment. CNN knows what it's doing. That's true, Maya. There probably are no libertarians that had anything to do with this. But still. The black community is a victim of that woman. Wow, way to go, lady. Yeah, Stacy Davis Gates is the problem. This is just irresponsible.
She's the one who is the racist here.
She's not being a racist. How is he going to back that up? Right? He's trying to back that up by saying that she supports people not being able to choose their schools. No, she doesn't. She never said that she was against school choice. She's against school choice programs. So she didn't say that. So that's gone. Well, she's the one that would rather these kids stay in failing schools. No, she's not. She never said that. She wants the schools to be better funded so that they're not failing anymore, and that people can put their kids. People don't have to choose to send their kids to the school on the other side of town. They can send their kid to the school right down the block from them because that's a good school too. She wants them to have more choices, not fewer. So that's out.
She wants to keep black children trapped in failing schools.
No, she doesn't.
Schools that she knows can't educate them. Schools that she knows don't give them the opportunity. She wants to keep those children trapped there. And
no, she fucking doesn't. Jesus fucking Christ.
On the other end, have the ability to let her children have the choice to go wherever they want, right? Have the ability. She sends, like she says, her kids to public schools, but that's her choice to do so. And guess what? When public schools are inadequate for her children, she cuts a check and sends them somewhere else.
So she cuts a check and sends them something. But when she just kept them in the public school, she was an evil monster for doing that, right, Nate? If she kept them in public school, she was doing that just to improve her credentials amongst her union buddies. So she's a monster, and she wants to subject other people to that monstrous rhetoric, that monstrous kind of logic. But when the going gets tough and she wants her kids to be in a better school, she can just cut her check with her fancy teachers union. This is blatant bullshit. Bullshit. If people were getting paid better money, better wages, this is fighting for the wrong thing. This is literally Nate taking on this kind of weird, the kind of the neoconservative model of, okay, folks, it's you versus the government. Get out there and demand your government money for your privatized schooling for your kid in the name of freedom and libertà or something. What the fuck? What the absolute fuck? Jesus. This is why conservatives I do enjoy it when they do try to engage in this kind of policy stuff, because this is generally where they fail. The one thing that energized the right wing movement in this country is just the blatant, stupid fascism of Donald Trump. And you can see that going on right now in the Republican Party. Like, he energizes them because he's an interesting guy, because he's just an authoritarian. And they don't really have to think about this kind of stuff. If Trump had his way, he'd probably approve some kind of school funding kind of initiative thing, probably blow the whole thing up. I mean, he did pick Betsy DeVos as his Secretary of Education, and she is an idiot. So, policy, not their strong suit.
Not many families in that neighborhood can do that. And that's the scandal here. She's a hypocrite.
She agrees with you. Nobody in those neighborhoods can choose any goddamn thing, Nate. They can't choose anything. It's not like they can choose a good thing versus a bad thing. All the choices they have are bad. You really think that people would pay $16,000 a year to send their kid to a private school if a public school could provide the same level of education and extracurricular activities that are going to help their kid get into college? That's the difference. That's what she mentioned before. You can send your kid to a high school in Chicago, but because of the lack of funding, maybe not a sports team for them to be on, maybe no clubs for them to be involved in. All those things are looked at on a kid's transcript when they're going to go into college. They can get the basics and get their high school diploma. Cool. Does it help? Does that education from that high school give them a leg up being able to get into college and go any further? Does it provide them any other opportunity? Even if they're not going to college, even if they're just, are they going to get an opportunity to improve as an athlete or improve as in anything, as an artist? Does it have programs in music, art, performing art, anything like that? Does it even have programs involved in trade stuff? Can they even afford that? Can they even afford shop? I mean, these are really kind of the things here. If they don't have that kind of stuff, they can basically just teach you all the basic things that you need to get in there and maybe a second language. That's it. You're done. You fulfilled the requirements. I mean, this is stunningly tone deaf. Like, part of the stuff, she would be right along with him in terms of, yes, I agree. They don't have a choice. They deserve better choices. And the choices they're getting are, they can go to charter schools. Maybe some of them can get into charter schools at the expense of the public schools that are already defunded and getting worse. So it can happen and continue to spite the public education there, which means there isn't a choice. You either get into a charter school or things just suck for your kid. It's almost as if the charter schools ultimately don't want there to be a choice. The choice there now is a marketing gimmick. The goal is to make sure that everybody has their kid in a privatized charter school so the school can collect the federal money and then the school can double down and collect tuition from the parents. That is the goal. And if you think that that's not the goal, you don't understand the business motivations of the people running for-profit charter schools and academies.
But tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section. Tell me if you agree with this woman. If you believe that she is trying to do this for the betterment of the black people, right? Tell me if you believe Obama and Shelton are racist for saying we need school choice, right?
You said that, Nate. Not her, and no one else did. You made that connection. No one else.
Are they the racist too? This is what happens when you can easily scream racism, racism, racism. But at a point, it becomes meaningless. And her claims of everything being racist is not because there's...
She didn't say everything was racist. She said the school choice programs were racist. In fact, she even kind of pushed back here and saying that she didn't say private schools were racist.
Any evidence of it, it's because she wants to make you feel like that's some win for her, when technically it's not. She's an embarrassment. Like, share, subscribe, do all the great YouTube stuff. Let me know.
Well, there is something embarrassing about this, but it really wasn't Stacy Davis Gates. I really do think she should have pushed back.
Where I'm wrong in the comment section. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
So, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's it for that. It didn't get any better. And certainly with what I noticed here was that he did start to kind of shift this over, because the first 10 minutes is just blatantly wrong. He just keeps coming back. She's saying private schools are racist. She's saying private schools are racist. She's saying private schools are racist. She never said that. With this one, it gets a little bit more nuanced, where now it's like, okay, well, she was actually talking about the policy. So let's see what she has to say about that. And really, I guess what he thinks is just like the killer move here, the fatality delivered on her is like, if you think that private school initiatives and school choices and voucher programs are racist, then any Democrat or liberal that's ever supported one of those, you're saying they're racist too. That's really it for him. Like, nope, that doesn't follow. And that's not what she said. And that's not what she meant. And what are you talking about? So, yeah, congratulations, Nate. This was probably one of the worst ones I've seen you do in a very long time. This was flagrantly just kind of a character assassination against somebody and if you either did understand what she said and blatantly took this out of context because the right-wing media narrative kind of gave you allowance to do that, or you actually believe that media narrative, in which case maybe check your sources, do a little bit more thinking and reflection before you go out and attack somebody like Davis Gates for saying things she didn't say. Let's see. Maya says Nate's aggrieved because a stranger called a policy outside of his state racist. Okay, yeah, that's the thing, right, Maya? Because I don't think he's really aggrieved by that. It's just a way of being like, hey, you know what? When you say racist over here, it trickles over here. Like, I've never seen a guy. Well, I can't say never. There's plenty of these kind of guys where if you do, and I'll just repeat this point again. You make a structural criticism about something racist in society, and they will try to then turn it into, well, I know so and so is connected to said policy or said positive things one way or the other about said policy or situation. So, what you must be doing in offering a structural criticism of racism against this thing is, by extension, accusing a person that's favorable towards that thing of also being a racist. And when you do that, maybe you're the one that's racist. Like, none of that follows. It doesn't make sense. It's a goofy thing to try to do. You can make a criticism about some kind of policy or abstract thing and say, look, this has some racist tendencies, or it's grounded in racism. It has a history of racism. Even the way it's enacted now is just basically racism, and they polished that turd up to make it sound like it's cool beans. It's a pro market initiative or some bullshit like that. But usually the end result is fewer kids get a quality education, especially kids of color in some cases. And even if it's not kids of color, it can often be just all kids in general. You end up with a more expensive school system with less accountability, less transparency. It's more expensive. Everybody loses except the private school systems that have a guaranteed income flow into them, right? And that's okay. But the quote unquote guaranteed income from dues going towards teachers unions representatives, they must be they must be corrupt. That's a corrupting influence, right? They want to keep those teachers in public schools so that they can keep that money flowing, and they can keep them dues in there. They can keep paying their representatives. I mean, they're just corrupt from the jump. But a private school that wants to position itself in between the public and the provisioning of public education to turn a profit, nothing to see there, kids. Staggering lack of self-awareness and consistency. So with that, I'll quit rambling on, and I will get out of here. Thanks everybody in the live chat for being around for this one. Please like and subscribe and do all that. Any questions or comments, please leave them. Leave them in the various places. You can reach out to me at jeffersonspatchcock@gmail.com. I'm going to get out of here, and I will see you next time with hopefully maybe something a little lighter, maybe something Darth related. I can point and laugh at him a little bit. Anyway, let me find my stuff here. I will play myself out. Take care, everybody. Catch you next time.